So I'm going to get started, and then if more people join, I'll just let them into the waiting room. So if you can't hear me, also just feel free to put something in the chat. But today's event is about intuitive eating and exercise. So thank you all so much for joining. And there will also be a recording of the event if you want to play it back after or if you join late. So in this event, I'll be talking about intuitive eating and exercise and some different practices, as well as if you've never heard the terms before, maybe what they mean and how you could practice them. Okay, so what we will learn today. So today we will learn what does it mean to do things intuitively, what is intuitive eating and exercise, and then some ways we can practice intuitive eating and some ways we can practice intuitive exercise. We will also be going over the benefits of both intuitive eating and exercise and also how this all relates to mental health. So why is this important? Why should you care about it? Why would you even practice it in the first place? So before we go into intuitive eating and exercise, first we should talk about intuition. So following your intuition and what it means to act intuitively, because that's the basis behind all this. So following your intuition is all about tuning into yourself and your body's current needs. So maybe what does your body need at that time? What are you craving that time? And it really depends. It differs from person to person, and it should feel natural and not forced. So you don't want any of this to feel forced. You kind of just want to kind of go with the flow, go with what you're feeling that day. Obviously, it'll differ from day to day, and no one can really tell you what your body needs because you're the only person in control of that, or you're the only person who can sense that. It also might not always be logical. Maybe sometimes you're like, oh, I just had dinner, but I'm craving something else or more food, or I had dessert, but I'm still craving something sweet. So it might not always be logical, but if that's what your body wants and that's what you're craving, then just go with it. There's no reason to try and go against it. So this also requires awareness of your current situation. So I think a lot of times when people are like, follow your intuition, they kind of just want to do something, but you also have to be aware of your current situation, since sometimes what you want to do might not actually be physically possible for you to do at that time. So let's say like you want to exercise and your favorite thing to do is swim, but it's winter and maybe you don't have access to an indoor pool. So you might not be able to swim. So instead you might choose to go on a walk or a run or something else like that. So you always have to be aware of your current situation and what the circumstances are, because that does differ from time to time and it will impact what your decisions may be when you try and follow your intuition. So I think a lot of things that people kind of relate this to, like when you say trust your intuition, or when you hear that term intuition, is to trust your instincts. So a lot of people are like, just trust your gut feeling. And obviously it's all easier said than done. But in the next few slides, I'll kind of go through how to kind of build that up so that it actually will be easier for you to follow, instead of just you hearing other people say, oh, like follow your intuition, just do what you're craving or do what your body wants. And then you're like, well, how do I do all of that? So I'm kind of just going to jump right in and cover those in the next couple of slides. So before we go into specifically for exercise and eating, I think it's really important just to go over some everyday examples of like following your intuition or listening to your intuition, just so that you know that this is something a lot of people do already and you might not even realize it. So for example, and this has nothing to do with eating or exercise for the first couple, stepping into a room with people and feeling like a lot of tension, so you decide to keep quiet. That's something that's following your intuition, right? Because you're in a room and you feel like, oh, like there's a lot of tension. Maybe I shouldn't talk to people. Maybe some people are like on edge or in a different mood. And so you deciding to keep quiet is following your intuition, because there's just like something you sense is kind of off, and you're not going to go talk to people if there's like a vibe that's just not really fitting with the like mood of the room and everything. Also, another example is feeling uncomfortable talking to a stranger, so you decide to walk away. That's another example of following your intuition as well, since you might not feel comfortable in that moment. Maybe you sense that something dangerous or bad could happen, so you trust your gut and you decide to just walk away. And yeah, that was like you following your body, what it wanted. So that's another example of following your intuition. And then this one actually does relate to eating. So craving something sweet after dinner, so you put together a bowl of ice cream. I always do this personally. But yeah, so that's also an example of following your intuition. You know, you wanted something sweet, you listened to your body, you made yourself a bowl of ice cream, and you satisfied that craving. So that's a perfect example. And then now we're kind of going to jump into how this relates to eating and exercise. So, with regards to eating, intuitive eating revolves around tapping into your body's natural ability to tell when it's hungry or satisfied. So, instead of labeling foods as like, say, good or bad, this really requires you to eat what feels right for you. So, maybe one day you're craving a bagel, maybe one day you're craving a salad, sometimes you're craving ice cream, and that's all valid. All of those cravings, all of those cues from your body saying that you want different things at different times, those are all valid, and it'll obviously vary from day to day and from person to person. But just know that you're allowed to honor that, and you're allowed to feel as if you can have those foods and satisfy that craving. There's nothing that should keep you from satisfying that, or trying to suppress your hunger or those cravings. So yeah, and then with regards to exercise, intuitive exercise, kind of going along with intuitive eating, just following your body, what your body's craving at that time. So you really want to connect with your body and find out what type of movement, if any. Sometimes you might think, oh, like it would be great to go like exercise right now, but I'm just really not feeling it. I'm super tired. And that's okay too. You don't always have to force yourself or your body to do something if it's really not something that you want at that given time. So intuitive movement is should be desired and enjoyable for you at a given time. It shouldn't feel forced. It shouldn't feel like there's any pressure to do anything. It's just supposed to be guided by how you're feeling, both mentally and physically at that time. So maybe physically you feel great and you have a lot of energy, but mentally you're just like, I need a break. Maybe you had a lot going on that day and you just need to rest. So even though physically you might feel fine, you don't feel any physical pain. If mentally you're tired and just burnt out, sometimes it's okay to take that rest, and it's totally valid to rest as much as you need, and vice versa. Let's say mentally you feel great, but maybe you have some pain, like your shins are hurting, or your hip hurts, or maybe your arms are kind of sore and you don't feel like doing any exercise. That's okay too. You're allowed to take those breaks. You're allowed to listen to your body and just give it what it needs. So, I know I mentioned before, definitely easier said than done. People are always like, oh, it's like easy to just follow your body and what it's craving. But it's often much easier said than done. I think, especially with social media and the inevitable comparison that a lot of people face when they view other people's lives online, we tend to second guess ourselves when it comes to listening to our bodies. So maybe you're like, oh, like you're like craving some sort of dessert or something, and then you see a video of someone eating maybe a salad or something, quote unquote, like more nutritious or healthier. And then you're second guessing yourself and you're like, oh, should I really be having this? If it's what you're craving, then yes, there's nothing telling you that one thing is good or one thing is better. It might just be at a given time you rather have ice cream instead of a salad, or another time you might be craving more veggies because you need more nutrients. It's really just what your body needs. And though you might see things on social media of other people doing other things, like maybe someone's waking up at 6 a.m. to go on a run, that doesn't mean that you have to do the same thing. If it's not something that you enjoy and not something that you think is going to bring any benefit to you, you shouldn't be doing it. You should only be doing things that you genuinely like and that you genuinely enjoy and that feels right for you and your body at that time. So, going on to some ways that we can practice intuitive eating, I think it's really important to distinguish between two things. So, physical hunger and emotional hunger. And physical hunger is like that biological urge, kind of telling you to replenish your body. So, you might have some cues such as like your stomach growling, or you might feel a little tired or fatigued, or maybe even a little irritable. So these are usually satisfied once you eat food. So like if your stomach's growling, you might want to go get a snack or a meal. And usually your physical hunger will be satisfied once you have enough of that to satisfy your cravings or however much you are hungry for. And then emotional hunger. So this is the second type. It's often driven by emotional need. So maybe you're feeling a little sad, lonely or bored. I know for me, it's a lot. I'll be like bored, so I'll just be in the kitchen, maybe like looking through the pantry, trying to find out what looks good to me. And cravings from emotional hunger are often for comfort food. So that doesn't just have to be like something warm like mac and cheese, or like soup. It's different for everyone. So like your comfort food might be like crackers or cookies or chips, or even something like chicken or whatever you're craving at that time. So really anything can kind of fall into that category. And for emotional hunger, as opposed to physical hunger, where it's your body's cues that you're trying to stop. So, like maybe you're trying to stop like feeling more fatigued or irritable. Emotional hunger is more of like you're eating to try and satisfy like mentally your cravings. So sometimes people might feel guilt because of that, because they were like, oh, maybe I wasn't physically hungry. Like really felt full after dinner, but I wanted ice cream. So I had that anyway. And now I'm a little bit guilty over that. You really shouldn't be guilty for trying to follow your cravings. Even though emotional hunger is different from physical hunger, both are still very valid. So if you mentally something sounds really good to you, you're like your friend maybe inviting you over for pizza or cookies or something like that, and you physically might be full, emotionally you're like, oh, like that sounds great, I would love to join. You could still listen to your emotional hunger cravings, and those are just as valid as your physical ones. There's nothing telling you that you can't listen to things that you want, and that you should feel guilty, because really until you satisfy your craving, it's not going to go away. So just trying to suppress that and ignoring that, in the future you're still going to be craving it anyway because you never satisfied it. So it's better just to satisfy it and move on and not feel any guilt. So moving on to some pointers or some tips, that I think is really helpful for intuitive eating, is to number one, reject any sort of like diet mentality. It's not all or nothing. So maybe one day you ate super healthy and the next day you ate a bunch of different foods. Maybe you had like a lot of sugar or something, and you're like, oh, I already had this one cookie. I'm just gonna have like ice cream and cookies and a bunch of stuff the rest of the day, which is perfectly fine. But if you're not craving that, you shouldn't force yourself to do that. Like it shouldn't be all or nothing. You shouldn't be like, oh, this day I didn't have the best thing, so next day I'm going to eat 100% healthy, like all fruits, vegetables, and protein. It really shouldn't be an all or nothing mentality. So everything fits, and just remind yourself that if you're craving that, you should be able to have it. And your body knows what's best for you. So your body's not going to crave chocolate chip cookies like 24/7 and have that to be all you want. You might think that, but sometimes your body naturally does crave something like vegetables or something with more nutrition, and that's fine too. You're allowed to crave anything you want, and you're allowed to honor that. So second, I think is really important to honor your hunger. So you have to learn that hunger is not the enemy. So we're only human, and yes, our stomachs are going to growl, and maybe sometimes we want two breakfasts instead of one, or sometimes we want a midnight snack and we're hungry for that. So it's really more learning to kind of follow the signs of your body and what you're craving, instead of trying to suppress that and be like, oh, like, no, like I don't deserve to have that at that time. Um, excuse me. So yeah, just responding to earlier signs of being hungry so that you can avoid doing something like overeating later. So I know a lot of times people might think, oh, like it's not the right time for lunch. But then you're just going to you might end up overeating later and then feeling guilty about that because you tried to suppress something by not listening to your body. So by intuitive eating, it really just focuses on at the time, if you're hungry or if you're craving something, just go and have it. And you shouldn't have to feel guilty about that. And you shouldn't have to justify it, because you're following your intuition and your body's cues, and that's perfectly valid. So I kind of went over this before, but don't label foods as good or bad. I think it also depends on how you grew up, maybe what people in your household or your peers have said to you in the past, like, oh, this is good or this is bad for you. Because there's not one single food that's like good or bad. I think everything could honestly fit into a balanced lifestyle, and you're allowed to crave whatever you want, and nothing should be labeled as good or bad, because it's honestly, one thing is not going to make or break your health. There's a way to incorporate everything, and you shouldn't have to stress, because the stress from stressing over if this is like good or bad for me is honestly worse for your health than it is to just have it and move on and just live worry free, with all of your cravings. So another good pointer is to have meals and snacks that both taste good to you and satisfy your cravings. So if you're forcing yourself to have something, maybe you're like, oh, I just had a lot of sugar, maybe I want something a little bit more healthy. But if you don't truly enjoy that, there's no point in having it. Like, you shouldn't be forcing yourself to have something that you don't enjoy, because you're just not going to feel good after, and you're going to feel as if something was forced onto you that you really didn't enjoy. So you really just have to treat your body with kindness and just really have what you're craving and whatever sounds good to you, because you deserve to enjoy the food you eat. You don't deserve to try and like force things into your body when you don't want it. So that's another really good tip. And then also, I think it's important to try and figure out what nutrients your body's craving. So a lot of times you might feel maybe as if you're low in like protein, or you need a little bit more fiber because you haven't had that much throughout the day. So kind of just keeping that in mind when you go and choose something to eat. Maybe you want a cookie, but you also know that you need some more protein. So you'll have that cookie still because you should follow your cravings, but maybe you'll pair it with some Greek yogurt or something else on the side. Maybe you'll have a glass of milk with it to dip it in to get your protein that way. So kind of just pairing different foods, so that you satisfy your cravings, but also maybe satisfy your nutrient levels. And then I just have this example up here, just in case you kind of needed to try and visualize something. So one way that you can practice intuitive eating, this example, maybe you're craving some Oreos. However, you know that once you open the package, you tend to eat past your fullness and maybe feel sick after. So I know for me, this is definitely something I've done. I'm that person who will open up the sleeve of Oreos and like eat the whole package. Um, so definitely been there, done that. But you also know that by ignoring that and having something like fruit instead will just cause you to eat the Oreos later on anyway. So you might even be having more than what feels good for you if you try and suppress that and not listen to your body at that time. So one suggestion is to make this a balanced snack so that you can both satisfy your cravings for the Oreos and then also give your body the nutrients it needs to still feel full. You could try having some Oreos with maybe some yogurt for protein and some berries for fiber and antioxidants. So I think like the last sentence here is really important, because instead of thinking of foods as like, oh, this is like good or this is bad, you kind of want to think of them as like what they'll bring to you. So like the benefit of them. So I mentioned Greek yogurt for protein. Protein is like a benefit of having Greek yogurt. Oreos, the benefit of that is satisfaction. Maybe you're craving something sweet. So the benefit there would be satisfying your craving, which is also a perfectly valid benefit. And then for berries, instead of thinking of those as something that's like healthy that you should have on the side, maybe just think of that as fiber and antioxidants, like some nutrients that your body needs, and that'll make you feel good. So yeah, just like trying to think of the foods based on what benefit they bring to you instead of what's in them and like the certain ingredients and all of that, I think is really helpful. And also a good way to start. So like building your plate around what types of nutrients you need and what also sounds good to you is a great way to start practicing intuitive eating. And then now moving on to exercise. So these are kind of just a few general like tips, or some like ways to like outline kind of the principles of intuitive exercise. So starting off by doing a quick like kind of body scan is what it's called. And this is just where you take a few seconds to focus on each part of your body from head to toe and kind of just gauge how you're feeling. So maybe you just take a moment and you focus on if you feel any pain, if you feel any soreness or looseness. So maybe I'm just like sitting here and trying to feel out different parts of my body, just maybe focusing from like my head to my toe. And I'm like, oh, maybe my shin hurts a little bit. So if I wanted to run, maybe that's not a good idea because I could injure that even further. So kind of just keeping in mind maybe your energy levels, anywhere you feel pain, just before you get started, determining what type of exercise you want to do. Because if you're super sore or have some sort of pain somewhere, you definitely don't want to do anything to worsen that. So again, that just goes back to kind of just thinking about your current situation and what you're dealing with before you kind of jump into anything. So another good point, to emphasize is you really have to think of what types of movement you enjoy. So how does that movement make you feel? Do you feel happy? Do you feel satisfied? Does it bring you energy? Is it something that you think is sustainable and that you can keep doing? Because a really important part of intuitive exercise is actually having movement that makes you feel good. You don't want to feel pressured into doing anything. And I know that a lot of us, especially me personally, if you're growing up as like an athlete, or maybe you did sports in middle school or high school or even college, sometimes those practices can feel forced. If you keep doing something repetitive, or you may have a coach that just you really feel is forcing stuff on you that doesn't make you feel good, um, it's just not going to be enjoyable. And maybe you should reevaluate if you truly enjoy that, or if you're just trying to do that to please other people and it's really not something that you truly enjoy. So another good point to keep in mind is, why do you enjoy that? I know for me, something I really like to do is run. And I know that I love running because it helps me really explore another area. So I love just running to try and figure out what's around me, like my surroundings. Just looking at everything that's going on. It also makes me feel really good. And I know that after a really long day, if I want to exercise or something, get some movement in, going on a run is something that really helps clear my mind. And for me, it doesn't feel forced, as long as I make sure that I'm only doing it when I want to do it. And then another thing to keep in mind is who you like doing this with. So a lot of people do prefer to just work out or exercise alone, and that's perfectly fine. And others prefer to do it with a friend or a group of people. So that's totally up to you. Some days you might want to do it alone, sometimes you might want to do it with a friend. And I know that for me, it definitely varies day to day. Sometimes I love to run on my own, and sometimes I love to run in a group, so that I have people to talk with. So it just really depends on what type of movement you want to do and who you feel best doing it with. And I think it's really a cool thing, because if you run with a group of people or do something else with a group of people, it just adds another component, because you could also get in like social time and stuff like that, and kind of just see it as an added benefit on top of being able to move your body in ways that you enjoy. So, another principle that I think is important when it comes to intuitive exercise is thinking about your why. So, are you exercising because you should or because you want to? And obviously, you should never do it because like you have to and you're forced into it. You should really be doing it because you want to. And this is going to take practice, especially if you're new to intuitive exercise. Um, but it's definitely not impossible to achieve. I know that a lot of people sometimes might view it as a punishment. It should never be that way. You should always do something that you feel is beneficial to you and that you genuinely enjoy. So maybe that might require you to go and like explore a new type of exercise or a new type of workout class. And that's perfectly fine. You don't always have to do what you've been doing. You can feel free to branch out, maybe try something new, um, and kind of just go with whatever your body's craving or what you're feeling. And that could be totally different day to day. Maybe one month you're really into running, and then all of a sudden you never really want to run again and you try to do yoga, or you do long walks instead. Or maybe you used to be on a high school sports team and you would have practice like 2 hours a day, 5 times a week. And now it's summertime and you don't have that anymore and you just want to relax. And that's perfectly valid. That's fine, and you shouldn't have to feel guilty for that. Maybe your body just needs some extra rest, and you're allowed to honor that and to follow through with that. Um, and going on top of that, don't skip rest days. I know a lot of people think that they should always be up and doing something. I know for me, I feel like sometimes I have to be like a big overachiever and try and get everything done. And if I see someone else doing something, I'm like, well, why am I not doing that? But your body really does need time to heal and recover. And I think it's so important to not overwork yourself, especially if you want to practice something intuitively. You shouldn't really feel burnt out. And if you do, you should take the rest that your body needs. Your body needs time to heal and recover, especially if you're doing anything super rigorous. Your muscles need time to repair. And if you're sore and you keep forcing exercise or physical movement on yourself, you're really not going to feel good. And it can lead to injury and even more pain in the future. So I think it's really important to rest, and definitely not something you should feel guilty for. Also, rest days vary person to person. So you're really the only person who can determine the amount of rest your body needs. And that can vary from week to week. So maybe one day you have 3 rest days and you're active for 4 times that week. but maybe the next week, let's say you want to rest for 5 days and only work out twice a week. That's perfectly fine too. There's no one telling you that you shouldn't listen to your body and that should be strict or forced or the same every week, because you're the only person, it's your body, like you're in control of that. And I think one thing to remember is that you're always in control of what you do and the type of movement that you choose. And you should just be choosing something that feels good to you and something that you think you actually enjoy, because that's what's going to be the most sustainable. If you don't enjoy it and you constantly feel burnt out, you're not going to be able to sustain that, and you're not going to be able to feel happy when you do it. And exercise should just be something that makes you feel happy. It should be an value add to your day instead of something that you dread, because then you'll be able to sustain it more and you'll be able to be really passionate about it because it's just something that you love. So going on to a little bit of an example. So let's say you're craving some movement since you've been inside all day. So it's a warm and sunny day out, and you definitely want to do something outside. And maybe you do a quick little body scan, kind of just trying to feel out what parts of your body are sore or you have any pain. And you realize that your legs are a little sore. So maybe you don't feel like running, and you decide to go on a walk. And then after your walk, your body's craving a bit of strength. So maybe you'll do a quick 10-minute core workout, or you'll find like a little YouTube video and do some strength. And then I know for me, I love to stretch after. It makes my body feel really good. And if I'm sore, I feel like it's a nice, good way to just stretch everything out and help my body recover. So maybe you stretch and foam roll as well. And then in this scenario, because you listen to your body, kind of what it was craving, instead of forcing everything, nothing felt forced, and you simply just listened to your body and the type of movement it was craving. So this is a really good example. Because it shows that maybe you planned to go on a run, but you felt like your legs were sore, so you just decided to walk and do another workout. And that's a form of movement too. That's perfectly valid. You shouldn't really be comparing things side by side and saying one is better than the other. Anything is perfect, like anything is better than nothing. And you don't even have to do anything for a really long time. You could just go on a quick 10-minute walk, maybe, if you're feeling that for the day. There's nothing telling you that like a given time for anything is better or more effective. It's kind of just whatever you determine and how you want to kind of frame your schedule or your daily movement for that day. And then going on to the benefits of intuitive eating and exercise. So listening to your body and really just doing the movement and feeding it what it's craving leads to a healthier relationship with food and exercise. So kind of what I said before about not viewing things as good or bad, will help you build a healthy relationship, because you don't want to be stressed out when you think about food and exercise. It's definitely something that tends to consume our brains, I think, more than we would like it to. So kind of just tuning in with your body and its needs will help you build a healthy relationship, so that you have that space in your mind for other things and that it's not something you're stressing out over, because it shouldn't be something that stresses you out. So going off of that, kind of, it leads to decreased anxiety surrounding food, exercise, or body image. And I know that this might seem hard, especially with things you see on social media or maybe comments you hear other people saying, but it definitely should not be something that stresses anyone out. It should really just be more craving what you're listening to your body's cravings and not really suppressing any of that or trying to validate any of that. It's more just you trying to follow whatever you're feeling that day, and you shouldn't really have any outside influence for that. So this will also lead to an improved mood, because the decreased anxiety around it. You'll be thinking less about stressing out over food and exercise, which can actually make you happier, because maybe you find that some sort of exercise you actually really enjoy and that can make you happy, or you're eating your favorite foods and you don't feel guilty about it. That can improve your mood too, because you're not stressing out over it. And that's what we want. Also, this is easier to sustain. So instead of forcing anything onto yourself, when you tune into your body and you actually listen to what it's craving and what it wants, it's going to be easier to sustain because it's something you enjoy. And going off that kind of like intuition concept, that means it's just going to naturally be part of your daily routine. So you'll be able to sustain that longer and you'll be happy doing it. So it'll actually be something you look forward to. And you want to be able to look forward to different aspects of your day instead of dreading them. So, also by doing this, you'll learn to connect with internal cues. So, maybe you'll know after certain foods or certain periods of time, maybe you're like, oh, my stomach growls after this, or I tend to be hungry X amount of times or X hours after I have this, and kind of just keeping that in mind. Let's say, for example, you have a 4 hour exam and you know that maybe like one bowl of oatmeal won't fill you up for those 4 hours. So maybe before that exam, you decide to have oatmeal, but then also add on some eggs or maybe have pancakes too. So, kind of just keeping that in mind, you'll be able to connect with your internal cues, kind of knowing how to fuel your body going forward and being able to determine maybe stuff that you should pack if you're heading off to school, just so you can make sure that you're fueling yourself properly and that you have enough to sustain all that energy and everything you need that your body's craving and the nutrients that it needs as well. So you'll also learn what different cues mean from your body. So maybe you feel sore and you know that that means that you did a lot of exercise yesterday and maybe you need a rest day today. So that's a good way to connect with your body and connect with those cues. Another cue might be that you're more irritable when you're hungry. So kind of learning that that irritability comes from hunger and not maybe someone else annoying you is definitely really important, because now you'll know how to solve that problem, because you could just get food and kind of just satisfy that craving, and satisfy that need for you to be less irritable. So after having that, maybe you find that your mood improves and that all you had to do is have a snack. So definitely packing extra snacks and keeping that in mind, in order to connect with the cues that your body's giving you and kind of lean into all of those is very helpful. So I know we talked a lot about intuitive eating and exercise, but this does relate to mental health. I did touch on it briefly, but now I'm kind of just going to sum it up. So intuitive eating and exercise can definitely help improve your mental health. So, like I mentioned, it improves anxiety surrounding body image and negative self comparison, which just comes from practice. It's obviously, it might be hard right away, but after you do it for a while, that negative self comparison kind of goes away, once you learn to tune into your cravings and do stuff you actually enjoy, because you'll be happy doing it instead of feeling like it was forced on you. And like I mentioned, leading to healthier relationship with food and exercise. So this means you're not constantly stressing about it, and that will help improve your mental clarity. You'll feel happier, you'll be more satisfied instead of thinking like, oh, like this is like forced on me or that I have to do a certain thing. And then also just dropping the stress around diet culture and unsustainable practices. Like I mentioned before, social media, sometimes it's really hard to tune all of that out. And like I get that, I see that everywhere too, but it's not impossible. And I feel like even though you might be seeing different like influencers or your peers, maybe some of them are engaging in really harmful practices or following different sort of like diets or something, like you don't have to do that too. You could choose to ignore that and choose to just listen to your body, because everyone's different and you really shouldn't be comparing two different people or comparing yourself to anyone else. Um, and then another thing is that this also helps you be focused and more present, because if you're not stressing about food and exercise, it won't be consuming all that space in your brain. So you'll actually have room to focus. Like let's say you're in school and maybe instead of stressing over what you're going to have for lunch because you're super hungry but like didn't really know what to pack, you'll be able to focus on your exams or actually listen, because you won't have that constant stress or thinking over food or exercise. And by eliminating that, it'll kind of just help you be more present, be able to engage with people, because if you're fueling yourself properly, you should have the energy to maybe be not as fatigued, and be able to engage in conversations and really just focus, whether that be in school or any outside conversations or even in your athletics. And then moving on to how neolth relates to all of this. So if you guys have the app or have been on the website before, there's a student stories section, and it has a variety of useful videos to actually help you with intuitive eating and exercise. So when you open the app or the website, I kind of just circled it right there. There's a little student stories section, so you can click on that. And then this is a screenshot of some content that I just had from the app or the website. And you can look through these videos. I know there's a series that has like some eat with me or cook with me videos, kind of just going through different principles of intuitive eating or exercise. So if you want to dive more into that, there's definitely a lot of content there for you to explore. Many great student stories, a lot of them from different people and different topics. So you definitely check that out. And then kind of just wrapping up here, I'm just going to go over the takeaways. I know we did cover a lot, so I kind of just want to make sure that there's some key things that stick with you guys from attending this event. So following your intuition when it comes to eating and exercise is all about listening to what your body wants at a given time. So that might vary time to time, like I said, varies from person to person. I know for me, it's never the same. Some days, maybe I want to go on a run. Other days, I want to just rest. Some days, I'm craving ice cream and all I want to eat is sugar and candy the whole day, and that's fine. But then other days, maybe I want something with more nutrients, like some vegetables or maybe more protein, and that's perfectly valid too. You never have to have the same exact thing or the same thing as someone else, and you should really just be able to tune into what you want and not stress over it. So this definitely all takes practice, and it's important to stay away from the all or nothing mindset. So just reminding yourself that one thing won't make it or break it is really important, and I think is really helpful. And then this is also important because it can help us be more in touch with our body's cues and needs. So, eating and exercise kind of correspond with each other. Obviously, if you exercise a lot, you're going to have to eat in order to fuel that. And your body might need different types of nutrients based on what you do. So, maybe as a runner, you know that you need strong bones because you don't want to have shin splints. That means you need a lot of calcium. So, maybe you'll have more yogurt or dairy or milk. So kind of just keeping in mind what your goals are and what type of exercise you need kind of can also help you fit into your cravings, or maybe think about different types of nutrients you could add to foods that you're craving so that you also have those goals in mind and you can achieve those exercise goals by properly fueling your body. And then practicing intuitive eating and exercise can have a positive impact on mental health. So we kind of went over that at the end. Kind of just taking all that stress and anxiety away from food and exercise can really help you be more present, more focused, less irritable, definitely. And also, when you fuel your body and do movement you enjoy, you can have better energy, so not as fatigued. And yeah, definitely less stress around eating and exercise can have a very positive impact on your mental health and your interactions with other people. So thank you everyone for joining. If you have any questions or want to chat, feel free to use the chat box. And if you want to become a student ambassador for neolth, I link the sign up below. There will be a recording sent out to everyone. And I think it'll also be on the app and website if you guys want to watch this video over. And if you have any questions, definitely feel free to put anything in the chat or reach out. I want to thank you guys all for joining. And that concludes our event. So thank you so much.